Jake's world was on the brink of collapse without him realizing it. That night he had been invited to a surprise party to celebrate a friend's promotion. Emma, his wife, had gone ahead of him to help organize the event. Emma's love for dramatic surprises was well known, so Jake thought nothing of it when she suggested. He arrived later to make a grand entrance. He trusted her and had no reason to doubt the night would go smoothly. But from the moment he stepped into the house, something fell off. The usual warmth of the occasion was overshadowed by a growing sense of unease. The house was filled with the usual sounds of cheerful chatter, laughter, and music. Guests were dressed to impress, mingling and enjoying themselves. But Emma was nowhere to be seen. At first, Jake assumed she was simply busy with the preparations, but his mind couldn't help but race. She wasn't behind the bar preparing drinks, as he had expected, nor was she talking with friends in the crowd. This sudden absence only heightened his suspicion. The people around him seemed unaware of anything amiss, yet Jake felt the weight of something unspoken. He continued to search for her, his mind swirling with questions that he couldn't quite answer. Then, a woman Jake didn't recognize approached him. Her face was tense, as though she had something heavy on her mind, but she didn't speak immediately. The strange, unreadable expression on her face immediately sent a shiver down his spine. "I think you should check the guest room upstairs," she whispered in a voice barely audible over the music. The words sent a chill down Jake's spine, but something deep inside him urged him to follow her cryptic advice. His heart began to pound louder in his chest as he took each step toward the stairs. There was no logical reason why he should feel so uneasy, but his instinct screamed at him that something was terribly wrong. As she reached the door to the guest room, Jake hesitated. A deep breath caught in his lungs as he steeled himself for whatever was waiting on the other side. He had no idea what he would find, but he feared it might be something that could destroy him. With trembling hands, he pushed the door open, unaware that this moment would forever alter his life. What a saw made time feel like it had stopped. His wife, Emma, the woman he thought he knew and loved, was locked in an intimate embrace with another man. Their expressions were filled with panic, guilt, and shame. The moment stretched on in complete silence, with Jake frozen in place. His brain struggled to process the scene before him, and for several long moments there was no reaction. He didn't confront them. He simply turned on his heel and walked out of the room. The shock and disbelief flooded him, but his body moved, mechanically, like it was on autopilot. The air outside felt cold and sharp against his skin, but it did nothing to clear the fog in his mind. The images of what he had just witnessed replayed in his head, each moment searing into his memory. Emma, the woman who had promised him her heart, had just shattered his world. His mind was a whirlwind of emotions: confusion, betrayal, heartbreak, and a deep, gnawing pain. The rest of the night passed by him like a haze. He went through the most, but felt detached from everything and everyone. When Emma finally returned home later that evening, Jake didn't want to hear her explanations. He didn't want to confront her, didn't want to engage. All he could do was remain silent, letting the weight of the situation press down on him like a vice. The next morning, Emma was insistent she needed to talk to, explain herself. Jake, still consumed by the overwhelming anger and sadness that bubbled within him, reluctantly agreed. They sat across from each other at the kitchen table, a place that had once been filled with warmth, laughter, and shared moments. Now it felt like the most alien place in the world. There was a cold distance between them that neither could bridge. Emma's hands were shaking as she sat before him, her eyes wide with fear and regret. Jake's gaze, on the other hand, was icy and unyielding, like a fortress. Around his heart, it was a look that made her feel as if she was suffocating under its weight. "I don't know what to say," Emma began, her voice quivering, "but I need to try. There's so much I need to explain. Please just let me speak." Jake didn't speak a word. He reached for his coffee, taking a sip with deliberate calmness before slamming the cup down on the table. His eyes never left hers, his expression unreadable, but his emotions raw and exposed. "Speak," he said, his voice low and edged with ice. "But know this. I'm at a point where nothing you say can change my mind." Emma's voice trembled as she tried to explain, her words faltering. It was a mistake, a moment of weakness. I don't want to lose you, Jake. I love you. I've always loved you. Jake almost laughed at her words, though. The bitterness in his smile was unmistakable. Love, he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. You're telling me you love me, while humiliating me behind my back with another. Man, that's love. If so, I want no part of it. Emma's face crumpled as the tears flowed freely. You're right, what I did was terrible. But in that moment, I felt so emotionally distant from you. It thought I was losing you. Thought I was neglecting you. It was a moment of weakness, Jake. I didn't even understand what was happening. Jake stared at her, his mind reeling. The pain and betrayal burned deep within him, but a part of him still searched for any hint of the woman he had married. He looked into her eyes, but all he could see was a reflection of the shattered trust that had once defined their relationship. He had to decide whether he would find it in himself to forgive, or if this betrayal was something too deep to overcome. Desolance stretched between them. As he weighed the choice before him, would he fight for his marriage, or would he walk away leaving the past? And Emma behind Emma clasped her hands tightly together, her fingers trembling in a desperate bid to steady herself. Her lips quivered as she spoke, the words barely forming through the emotion that choked her. Jake, she began, her voice breaking with regret. I know there's no one doing this, but we can overcome it together. We can save our marriage. Please, please give me another chance. Her eyes searched, his pleading for something, anything that might restore what they once had. Jake stood up suddenly, his body tense, a storm of anger and hurt boiling beneath the surface. He took a few steps away from her, the weight of her betrayal pressing down on him before he turned back to face her. His eyes were filled with a fire that was equal parts fury and devastation. What hurts me the most, Emma, he said, his voice shaking with the intensity of his emotions, is that you were able to lie to me. How could you bring yourself to do this to me? His words felt like daggers, each one plunging deeper into the heart of their relationship. Our marriage was built on trust, and now that foundation is gone without it. There is nothing. We can't build anything without trust. Emma. Emma sat across from him, unable to stop the tears that streamed down her face. She could feel her, heartbreaking with every word he said. Each tear was a silent apology, a reflection of the guilt that weighed her down. She searched his eyes, hoping for some sign of the man she had once known. But there was nothing, only an impenetrable wall of emotion she could no longer reach, despite the sharpness of his pain. A small flicker of sympathy ignited within Jake's heart. For a fleeting moment he almost wanted to reach out to comfort her, but that spark of compassion was quickly smothered by the suffocating reality of her betrayal. His heart hardened, his anger returning with full force, leaning over the table. He took a long, shuddering breath. I don't even understand what I feel for you anymore, he muttered, his voice low and broken as though the words were torn from him. Love, anger, disappointment, I don't know, but the only thing I'm sure of is that I don't trust you, Emma. And without trust, nothing else matters. Emma was crushed by his words. The weight of his disappointment was unbearable, and her mind reeled with the realization that she had destroyed the most important thing in her life. She could see the pain in his eyes, but more than that, she could feel the finality in his voice. The man she had loved was slipping further and further away from her grasp. Jake, unable to continue the conversation any longer, turned to leave the room, but before he walked out, he paused at the door and turned back, his voice firm, though laced with exhaustion. Give me time, he said, his tone hardening with finality, but don't expect a miracle from. The door clicked shut behind him, and the silence that followed was suffocating. Jake sat in the stillness of the house, the weight of the past pressing heavily on his chest. A cold, half-drunk cup of coffee sat on the table before him, a reminder of the life they had once shared, but now everything felt distorted, like a dream slipping away from his grasp. Her tears, her desperate pleas, reality that his heart could no longer hold on to the love he had once felt for her. The days that followed were filled with a numbness that made it hard for him to see clearly. The pain of betrayal was like a shadow lingering over him, refusing to let him forget, but amidst the darkness Jake knew that something had to change. He couldn't live in the aftermath of Emma's actions forever. He had to choose. He could either bury the pain deep within and move on with the pieces of his life that were left, or he could carve out a new path for himself, one that was not defined by her betrayal. It was one morning after weeks of turmoil that Jake stood before them, staring at his own reflection. The man who looked back at him was unrecognizable, exhausted, hollow and worn by the weight of the emotional toll. His eyes were empty, as though the life had been drained from him. This wasn't the man who had once loved Emma with all his heart. This was a man broken by the shadows of the past. But as he looked